me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so somebody asked me the other day, the salary that we set for the substitute teachers for the balance of this year, someone wanted to know why the retired teachers are making more than, for example, a current certified teacher that might be willing to sub.
I think it's historically we paid the retired teacher more anyway, as because they have all the years of experience.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a $30 bump across the board.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Okay. No, that's fine. I said I would ask.
Yeah, that's, I think, because the retired teacher, I think, historically has gotten paid more, and the increase was, as Tim was saying, across the board.
Plus
Okay.
you have to bribe them to not.
So you're
be
gonna,
sitting at
aren't you
home
gonna
doing
do your
whatever
own
else they
share
want.
screen?
Yeah, I do that now.
You're paying for
Yeah.
experience.
That's right.
No, I was asking, there was actually a current teacher.
Oh,
Well, she's currently certified, but she's not working full-time anywhere. And she was wondering, that she felt she was very current on all of the practices, and maybe a teacher who'd been retired for a while wasn't as up to date. So I said, I really didn't know, I'd ask.
Yep, that's the reason.
And the Tuesday.
Yeah.
So Joan will pop on, and then the other two ladies are gonna pop on at some point in time, and we have to make them co-hosts so they can
Okay.
share their.
So everyone can hear okay then, I take it? All right, very good. So our first budget work session here, and certainly the first for me in this role. So I'm excited to see how this process develops. And certainly Dana has been instrumental in helping me to understand how this process has been undertaken historically in the district. So with that in mind, tonight, just a brief agenda that we're going to try and cover is the focus areas that traditionally have driven the budget of the district, the process, some first draft details, new ideas that we've been discussing, and then what to expect as we look forward. And we will let Joan. So in terms of the focus, both the existing strategic plan and the goals that the board has adopted this year in relation to the strategic plan, but also in recognition that we will begin the strategic planning process starting in March with some early teams, and then pushing that process into the spring and early summer for the next strategic plan. And of course, the students first and foremost ethos that pretty much drives what we do in the district, our expanded desire to increase our involvement and outreach with the community, maintaining quality programs, and continuing to use the future planning process as a springboard for collaboration with faculty teams and idea sharing to improve our overall operations. Our budget process is to revise all known revenue and expenses as the information comes in, to identify and prioritize desired budget items, and to make strategic changes to the budget based on priorities and the available funding. So based on the information that we have, the knowns and unknowns, which Dana will speak to shortly, we're projecting at this time a first draft highlighted budget of roughly $20,892,082, roughly a 0.78% increase, with a property tax levy of $16,675,153,000, with actually a negative tax levy of 0.21, which Dana will speak to shortly. State aid flowing in at about 3.2 million, federal aid at 219,000, and a total estimated amount of the tax cap at $0. Anyone want to speak to our components?
Sure. You know, when you look at it and the breakdown of the budget, really what it comes down to is, and this has been pretty standard in terms of the last few years for budgets, administratively speaking, looking at just about a 2%, 2.62% increase. Program is seeing the largest increase, that's a little over 3%. And that's typically where we want that because that's where, you know, that's what impacts directly the students the most. You can see that the program portion of this budget is about 80% of the overall budget. And again, that's where you want the money to be, is in the program section of it. And you'll actually see a 13% decrease in the capital portion. And what's driving that is a reduction in our debt service. And that really kind of highlights why the tax levy cap rate now is a negative. It's because what we have been spending over the last few years for our debt service is going down. We have one bond coming off this year. I do believe it's the property bond of, you know, just about $900,000 that the school, the district took out a number of years ago to fix some property tax issues with a couple properties. So that's coming off. And what we have been spending the last couple of years for our van for the current project has been about $1.5, $1.6 million. And the indication right now, as we look to turn that into the bond for the next 13 years or so, it's looking more like $1.2 million is what we're going to be spending. So there's a reduction there. So when you factor in those declines, that leaves about why our tax levy right now is projecting to be a negative. It's about really, it's a difference of about $34,000 from the current year's tax levy. But if you remember in the January meeting when we talked about the initial budget, I did indicate that going forward after this year, you know, if things project the way they typically do, we will have a 2.1% increase going forward with the levy being able to raise about $280,000 to $290,000 going forward. So really, this is kind of that correction, that little blip. So on one hand, it's nice that we are reducing our debt service over the long term. This is a 13 or 15-year bond. At the same time, though, it's less that we can exclude. They kind of go hand in hand. So we'll have a little bump this year, drop, and then going forward, we'll kind of be back into the same portion. But that's really the major components of it. These are the three programs that we break our budgets down. If you look at the next slide, broke it down a little further in terms of major categories where the spending is. And these are basically our biggest expenses. We'll start off with BOCES. We're seeing just about a 5.5% increase for them. When we got the budget last year, I mean, the last week or so for BOCES, it was actually trending a little over 4% that we got for the administrative portion as well as the occupational. And the OC program, that's always on enrollment on a 5-year average. So as number of students that we send to BOCES fluctuates, it takes a couple of years to see that change. If you remember the last 2 years, the occupational side of BOCES, we had a double-digit increase. We were up in the 13 to 15% over the last 2 years. It's coming in at a little over 4% this year. And again, that is a reflection of a 5-year average in terms of our enrollment. As our overall enrollment goes down, and if we're sending fewer students, that eventually will impact both the budgets. But there's also some other things in there that are special ed related that we have to budget for in case there is that need. So that is factored in as well. We always like to have that as a budgeted item just in case we need to utilize a setting beyond our goals like we've done in the past. So that also attributes to that. Salaries, you're seeing, this current year we budgeted 9.2 million, going up to about 9.4, not quite a 2% increase. You might be asking yourself, a month ago, you said that the average for increases for LPA was like 3.8%, and the CSEA was 3.25%. Management confidential is about 3.5%, but yet we are only sitting at 2%. So there's a couple factors there. We do have some of the retirements that are happening this year, so that is factored in as well. So that's it. But also, all of this salary is not just actual. Here you go. Here are our staff. The lines that are counted in this are also all of our sublines. So the money we budget for substitute teachers and transportation and non-instructional staff, those are all in there, and those remain at a 0% increase. So when you factor in, we're budgeting less. We have a couple of retirees. Also, a number of our other categories are remaining flats. It kind of, shows why it's not a 3-point-something% increase. And quite honestly, we've said this over the last couple of years. One of my focus has been to really look at the budget and start to, create a more real budget and slowly, I guess, take away some of the cushions that have been, in there that have, I think, in the past been able to be there a little higher than normal, and we've been reducing that slowly over the last couple of years as well. We still need a cushion because you never know when someone is, taking a leave of absence for whatever reason, and we have to bring someone in. So those cushions do exist. They're just not as large as what they have been. And that's kind of what we've been, trying to do over these last couple of years since I've been in this position. Benefits, 4.5% increase. If you drill down there, our health benefits, they have decided to increase at 6%. And whereas the dental division, they're kind of staying pretty flat as well. So really the bulk of the increase is really on the health benefit side of it, absorbing some of that as well. And again, those are things where you do have to have a little cushion in there. Because again, you never know when you have to hire someone mid-year to replace someone in the area of benefits. So that, the health one, as you see, as a known, is 6%. And again, this reflects really just a more realistic budget and taking away some of the wiggle room we've had in the past. The debt service I've already talked about. I added 2 other categories just so that you kind of see what we're spending in them, because they are trending with our shift for our focus is going that way. Technology, we're spending a little over $200,000, so we see a little increase there in technology, about 1.5% increase. Professional development, we're seeing a much larger increase. Again, this is kind of looking at as the focus is looking at standards and things like that, shifting there in terms of allocations for that. Really, that comes down to is a shift in allocation, not that we added to the budget. Just shifting more resources into those lines to cover that need going forward for professional development. Questions on the major categories?
Yeah, with the professional development, you said shifting is, so when Tim, you spoke of having an extra period or an extra non-teaching period, I guess, for the development of the new curriculum, so to speak. Will those shift over, or is that would that be under salary still?
So this would have more to do with bringing in some some experts in the field to kind of help guide the faculty through the process of aligning the standards. Taking potential increases in salaries would fall under co-curricular. Isn't that correct, Dana?
Yeah, so, to your point, I think, Rick, you're referring specifically to department chairs
Yes,
and stipends there. So they are accounted for, as Tim talked about, in the co-curricular account code, which is generally under salaries. But for this purpose, I included it under professional development, so you can see that even though it's under salaries, it is earmarked for the specific purpose of professional development. So that's why, you see a 38% increase, $28,000 of that is really co-curricular salaries tied to department chairs.
great. Thank you.
Question on BOCES. Any idea how much of that increase is health insurance?
What they do give us a little breakdown, like the administrative component of
Yeah.
it is a little over 4%.
Yeah.
And then so there's been a shift over the last couple of years in terms of how BOCES reports out their benefits. It used to fall under the administrative side,
Sure.
and that's where we would see larger numbers, but I think there was a little pushback a couple of years ago, and they shifted it to the program side. So that's where we kind of saw double-digit increases because they were shifting over there. So that's really where health benefits lie. If you remember, and I don't know why you would, but the last couple of years, the administrative side of BOCES was like 1% increase, 2% increase. And
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not sure what the presentation was, whether it was a year ago or 2 years ago, but I remember them saying that the cost of their retired teachers
right.
accounted for an incredible amount of their budget.
Yeah.
Over 60%.
Something, I don't quote it, but it seemed totally inappropriate. I wanted to know what BOCES, what we do about that.
So in the end, any type of increase in the health insurance, it's 6%. It's going to be at 6%. That's what it's going to be a 6% increase in premiums for next year. That is felt across all the component schools, BOCES included. So they take it because BOCES does not raise revenue on their own. Their revenue comes from the component schools. So it is a trickle down. So if we see a 6% increase in premiums, that ultimately will factor in to the budget we see from BOCES because they have to pay for their health benefits as well. And that's why you're seeing a little over 4% administratively. And at the same time, on the program side of it, it's coming down because that's also based on enrollment. How many kids we have going to BOCES for the occupational side. And our numbers have been going down there. A couple of years ago, we had a pretty high number, but the last few years, that number is trending downward. And we're starting to see that 5-year average in the downward trend to kick in. So I suspect going forward, that number will, we won't see double-digit numbers like that unless they decide to hire additional people.
Okay, moving along.
I have a couple quick questions, if that's all right.
Sure, certainly.
Actually, more of a statement. I'm delighted to see the increase in professional development, but I still note that it is lower than the average nationwide, which a quick internet search says is more like 2 to 4% of salaries rather than 1%. And a little bit piggybacking on what Liam, I think, was saying, I am confused about where the expenses associated with retired personnel go. Are they under benefits here that we're looking at, or is that a separate budget entirely?
They would be under benefits. So when you look at our health benefits, it includes active and retirees.
Okay.
There are costs for them all.
Thank you.
But my understanding, Martha, right, is that BOCES doesn't use our insurance.
They are part of our health consortium.
They are part
They
of the
are
health
part of our,
consortium.
so
Okay,
they are one of the
okay.
component schools, if you will.
I guess that was
Yeah.
kind of where I was getting at, like, if their numbers aren't as good as our numbers, is there any way we could, force them to join a consortium? But you're saying they already are, so.
They are,
Yes,
yes. So, I mean, the 6% increase
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us is a 6% increase for
Okay.
their premiums, but
okay,
but their money is generated from the component schools.
Hmm.
So in the end, we're seeing, in essence, a larger hit because we're going up 6%. BOCES factors that 6% in and they push the cost on to the schools, all obviously based on number of subscriptions and all that, depending on school size and all that. So we're seeing an increase in the BOCES budget because they have an increase in their health budget as well. Yes.
it's just one of those sneaky, like, amount of money that goes up. Not so sneaky, but
That is correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
just from the BOCES side.
Right.
Yeah.
They are, and you've heard it over the years, is BOCES doesn't have a voting base. They don't have to take out a budget to the public. We are, their public, if you will. The component schools vote on the administrative part of it, not the program part of it. My speculation is a couple of years ago when they shifted from administrative to program side, it was because there was a period, a couple of years in a row, where Lake Placid, among others, were voting the administrative budgets down. It was still being passed because we're one of 9 schools. So I think there was a shift to get it out of administrative because that's the one component that schools vote on. That's just my personal opinion.
And there's broad support programming too. The CP programs are well regarded in
Right.
both the north and south end.
And school and districts don't vote on the program side. It's based off an enrollment on a 5-year, so it is what it is. So they shifted salaries and benefits for the most part into the program components of it. I think that's why we saw a double-digit increase over the last few years.
And I'm not sure if they've completed the exchange, but I think you'll all recall, at least when I was on the BOCES board, they were making a slow transformation from the administrative staff was under the programmatic budget. And by law, they had to switch over to the administrative budget for at least the administrative personnel on BOCES. So that was also creating quite an uptick in the percentage of percentage increase. And I'm not sure if they've completed that. Tim, you may know, completed that transformation.
I'm not sure, but I can certainly look into it for our next session.
The next slide is really just a visual representation of the 3 components. As I was saying, the program component makes a little over 8%, and that's where you want the money to be. That's the salaries, the benefits. That's the thing that impacts students directly. Not that administrative or the debt service doesn't, but that's where you want it. You want the program component to be this high. That means 80% of our budget is going to, why we're here, is for the students.
Dave, you want to just cover the knowns and unknowns here briefly?
Sure, and this kind of goes back to, adding on to the January meeting, the CPIU is, basically the inflation was about 4.7%. It got capped at 2%. We had a tax growth factor of 0.0044. A year ago, that was 0.0056. And why that number is important is it is a number that is used in calculating the tax levy. So the higher that number is, the more we can exclude. It kind of fluctuated Last year was 0.5, 0.0056, this year's 4.4. 2 years ago, it was in the fours. I'm told it's based off of the growth within the districts. And it is set, at the county level. We have no bearing on it. They basically say, here's your growth factor. Also, the knowns right now, the state aid is coming off of the executive budget proposal that the governor put out in early January. We're seeing a 3% right now, a 3% increase in the foundation aid, a little over 4% in overall aid. And part of that is, in one sense, a little misleading because 405,000 of that money they earmarked for us that gets factored into our overall number is for pre-K. And it benefits our students, but it's not coming to our budget. It's not money that we're putting into our budget. It's really money that pays for our pre-K program. And it isn't $405,000. It's based off of actual enrollment. So once the enrollment comes in, Catherine at St. Agnes, she submits the documents, and we get reimbursed based off of actual enrollment, not projected. But our cap is $405,000. We have never gotten to that. We're typically in the $340,000 to $370,000 range. I think we have 36 students currently in the pre-K program this year. So this year's budget is $360,000. But it's in there. It's been in there since we got the program. The $405,000, if they say is state aid, is really earmarked just for pre-K. So it's not really money that we put through our general budgets. ERS is 16.2%. That's the same as last year. It went up last year. It was 15.5% for many years. Last year it did go up. I just saw this morning that the TRS, they said to use a calculation of 10.29%. Last year was 9.8%.
Sorry, Dana, what are those acronyms, please?
The employee retirement system, so that's basically for our CSEA workers, and then the TRS is the teachers retirement system. That's for our teaching staff as well as TAs and administrators.
Thank you.
It's a retirement plan.
And Dana, that health insurance increase is a pretty good cushion. Is that correct?
What do you mean by a cushion?
I mean, it says increase of 6%, but typically we haven't been doing a 6% increase every year, have we?
That is correct. If you look at the last 5 years, we've been trending 1 to 3%. Last year it was 2%. So that was a big jump to bite off from 2% to 6%. My voice was lost out because all the other districts except us were seeing a bump in state aid that we are not seeing. Our 3% that the governor's proposal amounted for $57,000. A district very much like us, Upper Lake, in budget size as well as enrollment, their 3% increase is $200,000. So part of the reason was for the 6%, in the words of people on the consortium, districts have a little extra money this year to play with, therefore it's a good opportunity, good time to increase it larger than normal.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing, but I could easily have put that in quotes. Most of these costs, I said, it's a little over 5% increase. We talked about that. And we've also the knowns in terms of the actual salary increases. The unknowns, March 1st, I have to submit the tax cap information. And I will by March 1st. There's still a little tweaking because don't really have the final number yet for our bonds. I don't envision it's changing much, but until we have that actual final number as to what our bond is, it's not 100. I can't say for 100% certainty that this is our bond payment for next year. It's There's probably gonna be a little fluctuation, but it's gonna be minor. It's not gonna be a major difference. And then ultimately, we don't have our actual state aid. That won't be available until the budget is formally adopted. Right now, we're going off the governor's proposal, which historically, generally, it has been a little higher in the past than the governor's proposal, but not by much. But I don't know if there's going to see a lot of changes because the governor's proposal came out and it was a significantly higher than what we have typically seen in the past out of the governor's office. We've generally seen either a flat for foundation aid or no more than like a 1% increase. So to see that all the districts will get a minimum of 3%, I don't see that going down, and I can't imagine we're going to see much more than that because I think a lot of the parties involved are quite happy with the governor's proposal for education anyway.
I have a question about the final property tax cap. In an earlier slide, it said 0%, and now it says that it's an unknown. Maybe I'm comparing apples and oranges, but could you speak to that a little bit?
That 0% basically refers to we're not going to exceed the tax cap. So that 0 just means we're going to go to the maximum, which at this point in time is actually a negative 0.2085% decrease. So basically when we submit to the state the tax cap, they want to know what the cap is and if a district is going to exceed that cap. So in the previous slide, that 0 means we're not going to go over it. We're going to max out our tax cap to what is allowed, which is actually less than what the current tax levy is by $34,000.
Thank you.
And then just circling back away from the finances and just to some of the programmatic side, what's actually included in this first draft budget? Well, first and foremost would be year one funding to cover the technology personnel that was hired this year in year one of the American Rescue Plan funds. That's our technology IT technician that's been long needed in the district and would be continued to be borne by the budget henceforth. The district social worker and the RTI math elementary are projected to be covered under ARP funds both next year and the following year. So that won't have any impact upon the budget. The professional development includes the standards alignment funding that we had discussed at the previous board meeting. Summer school is also included here. You'll note that one position and program we've talked quite a bit about, community schools. We're still waiting on a few pieces of information as to how to proceed in terms of creating a position for community schools. There's 3 different avenues that we could look at based on the information that comes in late March. The first would be to shift existing personnel if there was an opportunity to absorb the course loads that we project when the schedule is built. And the scheduling process for classes is starting actually February 28th. Typically, that's a summer process, so we're starting that many months in advance so that we can have kind of a sense of what the pulses of the classes. We also have the ability to use our title funds and some prevention funds that will no longer be encumbered with the retirement of Tina Clark that have been budgeted in. That also provide us an opportunity to look at community schools funding. And last but not least, multiple grant efforts that the district has put forth that we expect to hear back from in late March. So 3 different avenues for that potential work to occur. And then just looking ahead, these are our key dates. Looking at our levy submission, as Dana said, for the 1st of March. Our next work session, the 22nd of March. Board petitions due on April 18th. Budget adoption on the 26th, the hearing on the 10th of May, and the budget vote on May 17th. And that is the culmination of the information we have at our disposal presently.
Question for you. In the past few years, we've seen budgeted for vehicles such as pickup trucks for towing and that type of thing. Are we all up to date on those? That's my first question. The second one is, have we purchased any equipment in the last year?
You want to talk about the F-150, Dana? Or
We
is it
did,
250?
we did purchase a new truck, an F-350.
Okay.
Using existing funds. So kind of looking at the budget mid-year, we did trade in an older truck for a new plow truck with sander and plow.
And going forward into next year, is there anything anticipated?
No, not for vehicles, other than we have our normal bus leases coming up.
Right.
Now there'll be now I think we have 3 coming up. So that will be that's standard for that. But we're not looking at anything expected at this moment in time for vehicles.
Right.
No.
And the bus leases are a separate line item. So on the boat, they're not included in the budget, correct?
The payments for the lease is, but yes, the leasing of it does go directly out to the voters.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Is that all you have? That's enough. I'm not.
We can give you more if you want.
No, thank you. Well, so next time, I know in the past, Dana, you're familiar with the ever evolving and changing Excel slide that shows the budget and where we are and how close to our tax cap and so on and so forth. Will we be expecting that?
I did include, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but under the documents, I did give you a tax schedule, which I've done. I know in years past, well, not really since I've been in this position, we used to get like a scale and reduction, and this is, but
Right.
My approach has been since the onset of me being in this position is I'm always going to present the board with a balanced budget. Not here's what our is and here's our revenue, and we need to make up $300,000-$400,000. If you will notice, what I presented to you is a balanced budget based off the current.
Very practical of you. Thank you. Anybody else have anything before we move on and open the meeting?
Thank you. Do you need to go over any of the additional documents, the property tax cap, the tax schedule, budget categories? I mean, we hit upon most of all of it in the presentation. I didn't know if anyone had any more specific questions on that. If not, they're there. Those documents haven't changed from year to year. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but I don't want to assume.
Okay. Is everybody all set?
All set.
Okay. So I'll call the regular meeting to order. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sounds like a bad chorus on this end, but on that, I want to apologize. On that note, I want to apologize for continuing to be remote, but I had all intentions of being in person, but I didn't think you'd want to see me just standing in a corner. So I'm still not able to fully sit. So with that said, the consent agenda recommended action is approve the following items, which are included on the consent agenda. They include 6A, the meeting minutes, 8A, the 2022-23 calendar, 8B, the sports merger, and 8D, special education. May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda, please?
Yes.
Daniel
Daniel.
Howing.
Colleen, right? Any exceptions? Anybody want to see anything or discuss anything? If not, go ahead and vote.
Liam.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda passes 7-4, 0 against. Budget workshop we completed. Good of the cause.
There are
Karen,
no
do you have-
emails.
No email. Anybody present wishing to make a statement?
No, just our 2 people online.
Right. Okay. From there, we will move right on to the presentations. We have with us tonight the Outing Club, be discussing their desire to build a storage equipment barn on the elementary school grounds. It is all yours. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us. Myself and Deb are here. We have a brief PowerPoint that we can show you on the club and what we're asking for, and then can take any questions that you guys have. Let me just share my screen. This works. Share. And then, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, it's like doing weird things on mine. Oh, perfect now. Okay, so those of you who don't know the Outing Club, we're focused on providing social capital to the children in the district. It serves, Lake Placid, Saranac, Keene, Wilmington, open to area kids, because we're really just focused on getting kids outdoors, whether that's hiking, biking, paddling trips, you name it, cross-country skiing in the winter, things as simple as sledding. We want to focus on providing outdoor fun, electronic-free fun, and really help kids build self-esteem as they go through some of these achievements. I had the luxury of leading a trip this summer on a hike that I've done a zillion times. And I told my husband, I'm like, it was the hardest hike I had ever been on, because we got a kid who had never been a hiker to the top. And it took a lot of coaxing and reassuring. And when he got to the top, the look on his face was like absolutely amazing. He was so proud of himself. And so that's why we exist, to try to get kids out, to give them something to do in the summer. From that perspective, let's see. Over the years, obviously to run all these trips, we've acquired a lot of gear, whether that's been by purchasing or people having donated it. So we have everything from canoes to kayaks to day packs to boots for hiking. And all of that stuff right now is stored largely, or I should say, between Dave Balestrini's basement. We have a barn, and we have some stuff as well at other board members' homes. And so for us, that's not an ideal solution. Long term, it makes it harder for trip leaders to find the gear. It makes it harder for trip leaders to have like a creativity of walking into this barn and saying, oh, wow, you have this, I should plan a trip to do X, Y, Z. So we've spent some time thinking about, wanting to build a barn to house all of the gear, and then think about where should it really be housed, what makes logical sense, and what would help us pull in people. So our ask is to build a new gear barn, we call it, on the elementary school property. that would store our gear as well as any of the outdoor gear from the elementary school as well. So I believe there's like a separate shed somewhere else right now, but we would try to combine that. It would give, the gym teachers and teachers in general access to this if they wanted to borrow it during the school to use for classes or whatnot. And really for us, when we look at this, it creates like a central repository, a meeting place at the elementary school to kick off all of our trips. And by putting on elementary school property, our focus is on trying to pull kids in at younger ages, trying to work with the teachers and trying to elevate the outing club as a resource that can be there for children. So we want to truly focus on engaging more kids and families. Let's see. Then the last slide here that I have is on funding, like of what would our next steps be. When we look at this project right now, we're hoping to write a LEAF grant. The LEAF group, through Roost, they've generously funded the playground. There's been a lot of things that they've done in the community. And so obviously this is a significant cost to build something like this. So our goal is to try to lock down where will the location be so that we can kind of keep speccing out what the full costs are to go out and come up with a LEAF grant and any other grants that we might need to write to get funding. But it's pretty difficult when you apply for grants, over $50,000, we need to have a very detailed budget specced out. So we kind of need agreement on what is that grant or where is the location of it. And then we have some outstanding costs and operational considerations that we need to work through. One being site prep. We've had various conversations with Tim and Dana and other people in town where some people have said, Department of Public Works might help us with site prep. We need to put that ask out, but we also need to know where is the site. Tim has thrown out maybe BOCES might be interested in helping actually build this as one of the projects that they take on, which would be amazing for kids in town to help build this and then drive by it on a regular basis of having some legacy that they're building for the kids who are in the BOCES program. And then we also, we've looked at a structure here based on what we felt we needed for the outing club, but we need to have some conversations with the elementary school and talk with Sonia of what is the gear there, what stuff, do they need to store as well, of how do we house this stuff together. And lastly, we need to work with the electric department to determine, can the power for lighting and stuff be tied into the school? Do we have to run new lines out to the street, etc. So our real ask, is just for approval to house this on the elementary school's property. These are some of the specifications. Deb, you've worked a bit on this. Do you want to talk to this a little bit?
Yeah, so these are just some initial drawings that we worked up based off of what we believe would fit the outing club gear. I did meet with Sonia just really briefly the other day, and she feels they would move minimal gear into the barn at this point, but really our vision is once the weather gets a little better. I think Dana and Tim were looking forward to walking the site that everyone kind of has in mind. And I think Sonia was interested in that as well, just so that we can double check to make sure that these rough dimensions would be sufficient for the long-term need. But yeah, pretty much just to echo what Lynn was getting at in the very beginning is we really just want to see these resources used by as many kids as possible in the town. And if a teacher could benefit from having access to our snowshoes or anything else we may have, we'd be so excited to share that resource. So again, these are just very preliminary drawings. They were worked up by Jess Hoffman of West Branch Drafting. And we're more than happy to revisit them based on recommendations and once we stake out the areas and whatnot. But this is just roughly what we think would suit the purpose.
Speaking to that, if I may, just briefly, I know a few years ago, it was probably 4 years ago, the north end of BOCES, not only did they do a tiny house, but they also did a storage shed. So I agree with Tim. I think if you could get to them sooner rather than later, when they're planning their projects, either the north end or the south end, and seeing if they could construct it, even offering them, to buy it outright. It's not, and maybe even include solar. I know their tiny houses all have solar and wind to be off the grid. So just a suggestion.
Oh, that's a really interesting suggestion, because I know there were some initial discussions of talking to Kimball about running the power from the existing parking lot, lighting, but we have such minimal power needs, just really basic lighting. And then you'll see that small enclosed space. We're hoping to be somewhat temperature controlled just to preserve some of the synthetics, because things deteriorate with changes in temperature. So we'll have minimal heating and lighting, and that'd be it. So it'd be interesting to talk to BOCES about their solar plans. Any other suggestions? Oops, sorry.
Sorry, Debbie and Lynn. I just want to say that last summer, actually it was in early June, I have a center over in Saranac Lake, and kind of at the last minute, I approached BOCES. I forget the gentleman's name that runs the program. They were willing, it was only a week before graduation, they were willing to come to the center to install a full playground similar to the elementary school.
Wow.
We ended up not using them, but my point to it was that they were just so receptive. The gentleman came over with some of the students from the program. They visited the site. They were all excited to do it. And then at the last minute, we had another group come in, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't be pretty excited about this project. And my own family has utilized this program for years, and it's just such a wonderful program that has been in our community for a long time. And I thank you both very much for all of your efforts.
Thanks. We're super excited. I mean, the idea of BOCES had never occurred to us till we met with Tim. So I think, that's definitely next up on our agenda will be to reach out and see if they were willing to join in here.
And Lynn, I've had some preliminary discussions with Rick Swanston at BOCES, and they're very keen on the idea. Their tiny house this year, they actually are essentially done. If you think about the level of instructional time between now and the end of the year, just like Rick was saying, you can fill that with smaller projects, but they've done something similar in Tupper Lake a few years ago as well. So I think just having the planning and the foresight, if this comes to fruition through a grant, for this work to take place in the spring of next year. And the only logistical consideration would just be if the dimensions of the building stay at 12 by 24, just that their garage bay, they'd obviously have to do it in sections and put Humpty Dumpty together on the elementary school property, but very receptive to that. So I certainly think that's a thread we should definitely pull on a bit more.
Okay, that's great.
Is that the footprint? The 12 by 24 is the proposed footprint?
Yeah.
This is 20 by.
That's what it's at right now. And I think that's why it'll be important for us in the spring, or, once snow starts to melt a little bit, to go and stake this out, really put down some measurements there so that we can see what it looks like. Getting back to the solar thing, we can understand like what's the sun exposure over in that spot as well.
They should go ahead and throw on another 10 feet on one of those dimensions, but that's just me.
Well, I that is a legitimate concern when it comes to staking it out is, and Dan, I'm sure you're aware, like we have whitewater kayaks and flatwater kayaks. So I think in the spring, when we do stake it out, we will into the specifications, measure out all the gear that needs to fit in it and ensure that we're not building something permanent that doesn't suit fill the needs,
Yeah, I can tell you, as someone who has both whitewater and flatwater craft, they take up an inordinate amount of space than they should.
We would love your assistance and recommendations.
There you go, double it.
Debbie, I just got, or Lynn, whoever, I just have a question. Who would actually own the structure?
We think it would be the school because it would be on the school property.
Mhm.
So then are we granting, Lake Placid Outing Club a license to use it, or gonna have, is this gonna be a gentleman's agreement? I would just curious how, and the only reason I bring it up is because we're gonna have a lot of really good gear out there. And so are we insuring, is our insurer covering it? You see where I'm going with this?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not dissimilar to the origins of the Ship and Use Center where
Right,
we have to
and
build
with,
in that.
and with the Ship and Use Center, if I understand correctly, they actually maintain the insurance because there was originally a lease agreement between the district and the Ship and Use Center.
Okay.
For the 10-year, and then followed with another 10-year. I think it has elapsed since then, and nothing. But they do. The Ship and Use Center does carry their own insurance, so it could also be the same situation here where the outing club carries insurance for that, and we enter into a lease agreement with them. Like, that's what we do with the Ship Center.
And will we have, to get a little bit down the weeds, but I'm just kind of gaming this out. So then who in the Lake Placid Outing Club would have access to it? Is that only from one person, or is access to this shed gonna be whoever, this parent or that parent? I guess who would be our contact person, or who would be responsible on your side for access?
Yeah, I think you're definitely a little bit one step further than we are right now. I think, we would definitely make sure that the school, that we appointed a contact here. I think we'd have to think about whether we put a camera on it so we know who's going in and out, like a ring camera or whatnot. And whether there's a set of keys, whether there's a code to get in, a code that could be changed for each parent and deleted, same way that people are doing with their rentals. But I think it's a very fair point, but it wouldn't be, necessarily a free for all that anyone can come in. I think you'd have to be permitted. You'd have to be a trip leader, etc. I think the only other thing that we have to sort out that we've also kicked around too is, can some of this gear be lent out during the year to families to take home for a weekend as well? So we'll have to, do a little digging on that sort of stuff as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, Debbie, Lynn, thank you very much for your presentation and for being here tonight. That's great.
Thank you for having us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Moving along, reports to the board. Dana, the budget performance report.
Sure, the first document is the monthly reports. And you can see, beginning of the month of January, favorable in terms of bringing a little more revenue this January as opposed to last January. But unfavorable in terms of expenditures, spending a little more this past month as opposed to last year. And that's kind of the month to month. But then if you look at the year to date, we're still revenue wise, we're a little under plan by about $900,000. I'll repeat what I generally say every month is, this is always a snapshot in history. I can tell you right now, last year in January, we had moved our TRS money, which is part of state aid, into our revenue accounts, whereas this January, it had not been done yet. That's about $700,000. So that kind of, it really exemplifies what I say is it's a snapshot. So really, that would be a $200,000 difference as opposed to $900,000 difference. Something we do every year. We just didn't do it in January. It was done beginning of February. Expenditures, we're still trending in a very nice light. This is saying $1.3 million. But again, it's a snapshot. I can tell you right now, we have surpassed our year-to-year look. As I looked at it today, we're actually trending above where we were last year of expenditures. But again, that's just a matter of when things get processed. But caution you that when I just saying, oh, we're trending higher than last year, if you remember last year, we ended up about $900,000 under what was budgeted. So it's hard to base last year and even a portion of the year before in terms of our expenditures because of COVID. So we're really spending this year in a typical fashion that we have done in the past pre-COVID. So next month, when you see that number and you go, oh my goodness, why? I'm telling you now, it's because we're looking at a budget last year, and that's one of the documents I provided. I'm not going to get into the other documents. It was more for your information. There was one of them under expenses. It kind of shows you expenses the previous several years, back to 2017. So it's kind of showing you where we were a couple of years ago, as opposed to where we are now. It doesn't show a historical look. They're all the same because those numbers weren't put in. And again, those other documents that I've provided is truly more for information at this point. In terms of the variance parameters, it's more about the reading as to what each category means and the expenses associated with that. But as it looks right now, I have no real issues in terms of our budget performance. We're still trending pretty well. I feel pretty good about where we are trending. Expenses, our variance right now is about $400,000, which is typical. Questions on the budget performance update? As I said, with these other documents, the variance, revenue and expense, and then the kind of a historical revenue expense, it was really, it's really information for you. And if you have any questions related specifically to it, I'm more than happy to answer them. But really, it was more about the description of the various categories, just kind of give you some additional information for you. If not, we can move on to the treasury report. Still looking pretty good in the treasury reports. $16 million in the insured cash sweep. A little over $2 million of that is the capital fund. That kind of goes back to the bond and all that. And we're almost to the end of paying off the last remaining small things that we had that we did internally that are tied to the capital project. We fixed the doors of the auditorium. The framing was all bent, so that was a capital project expense that just got done. We're replacing all the interior doors, and as you know, getting supplies has been an issue. We put in orders back in the summer, and we still have doors coming in. It's something we've been doing over the last couple of years. So we tied that to the capital project as well because it falls under the scope. So expenses like that are coming in and getting completed. So we don't have that final number, but we're probably going to have about a little less than $2 million that we probably will be giving back when we turn the van into a bond. But treasury report, we're still looking pretty good, pretty healthy. $750,000 outstanding. You can guess what the two big ones are. It's typically the case month to month when we have big outstanding budgets. Lots of our money goes month to month to both these.
So Dana, can I ask you about the capital project? Is there a guarantee on the elevator work? I was here last week when one of our employees, or two of our employees, got stuck in the elevator. Called the fire department at 9:30.
Yep. Yeah, it's all under warranty and stuff like that. So Bobby reaches right out to the elevator. It's interesting that the company got the contract, so it's more of a subcontract, is really the one that services all this area and all that. So it's a company that we use, and they do our annual inspections. So Bobby just gets on the phone, they come, and they don't have the issue and all that. So I have not seen the bill on any of these issues that's the capital project because it is still under warranty. Yes.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
They totally rebuilt that elevator
Yeah.
to have it happen twice now.
And some of the early issues, we had a leak that would pop up in the shaft, and that was a roofing issue. And I think I don't think we've had any leaking issues this winter, whether over the auditorium or the elevator shaft. So I think since last winter, they have solved all the leaks from the roof. And generally, those leaks are around, I've seen that was not sealed properly and all that. I think we have gotten that under control as well.
Any other questions on budget, performance, or treasurer's report? Hearing none, let's move on to the superintendent's report. Tim?
Lots of good conversation and collaboration amongst the faculty over the last couple of weeks. The future planning process is underway. Last week, Mrs. Franklin and I met with departments at the elementary school to discuss ideas on how we can grow together and support our students and faculty. This week, on Thursday and Friday, I will head to the middle high school as well and conduct similar meetings with the teams with Mrs. Casey and with Mrs. Lindsay. Friday of last week marked the culmination of 2 book studies that our faculty were completing. 61 members of our teaching staff completed this voluntarily. And the 2 books were based on trauma-informed education and ways to fend off teacher burnout. The studies and the books themselves were a novel way for colleagues to conduct professional development in spite of the limited number of substitute teachers this year. The reviews on the books were mixed, but the model for professional development, being asynchronous with their colleagues, was strongly supported by the faculty and is something that we should look into in the future. Also last week, we had another visit from Mike Nerney, who returned to present to students this time in the middle high school on the psychology and physiology of addiction. Mr. Nerney attended the district earlier in the year and presented to community members on the dangers of new forms of marijuana as part of a larger discussion of the presence of dispensaries in the town and the village. On the subject of COVID, the governor recently authorized the Commissioner of Health to extend the wearing of masks until April 22nd. This was made effective today. I'll note, though, this does not mean that this will be the actual guaranteed date when masks will cease to be worn, or that masks could theoretically be removed prior to this in schools. This only authorized the Commissioner of Health to have the authority to have masks in place up until April 22nd. In a recent statewide poll, 58% of citizens in the state indicated that the governor should not remove the mask mandate in schools until early March data is gathered and analyzed. This will be an ongoing topic over the next several weeks, with the governor planning to provide an update on the state of the pandemic during the first week of March. On the athletic pitch, lots of exciting things happening and lots to look forward to in the near future. Tomorrow, the girls basketball quarterfinal sectional game will be home versus Ticonderoga. The game will be in our gym and starts at 6, with the winner playing Northern Adirondack on Monday the 28th. Boys basketball on Thursday the 24th. Quarterfinal sectional game home versus Ticonderoga will take place. The game will be in our own gym and start at 6 p.m. with the winner moving on Tuesday, March 1st to play. But some of the results are already in, and we should certainly be proud of our athletes, and in particular, the performance of our Nordic teams. The girls Nordic team are the Section 7 team champions. Sam D'Amico placed 2nd, Maya Garrison 3rd, Holly Aronstone 5th, Nora Galvin 6th, and Harley Cohen 9th, in what can only be described as an epic sweep. When you think about what the capabilities there are, they'll be moving on to the state championships. So certainly congratulations to the Nordic team. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the girls Nordic team, who had the top 75% of their athletes have a collective GPA of 99.14%.
That's great.
That's fantastic. All of our top 75% of our teams did exceptionally, ranging from 91% to 99.1%. But the Nordic girls had the high watermark for the district with regards to that. The boys Nordic team performed outstandingly as well. Andrew Scanio was actually the individual sectional champion for the entirety the region. And Aiden Fay placed 6th. They will also be going together to the state championships. Colin Francis was 11th, and he will be the alternate for the state team. The Nordic and Alpine State Championships will be at Gore this year on February 28th and on March 1st. So good luck to our athletes finishing up this competitive winter season. And it's time for students and their guardians to register athletes for spring sports. Sports available in the spring to sign up for will include modified and varsity baseball, modified and varsity softball, varsity tennis, varsity golf, modified and varsity track and field, modified lacrosse for boys, and varsity lacrosse girls. Varsity practices will begin on March 14th with a modified start date no earlier than the 21st of March. More information on sports signups will be forthcoming. On the arts side of the house, the Lake Placid Drama Club is close to its production of The Little Mermaid, which is slated to take place on March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. On behalf of Mr. Prosper and Mr. Gotham, I would just like to acknowledge to the board that the drama club was planning to coordinate with the board to provide a bit of a vignette of the production, but with the change in meetings and the students being off today, it didn't work out the way it was intended to. But that next year they look forward to providing a little bit of a sneak peek to the board for the drama club's production next year.
Will that be open to the public, Tim?
Yes, it will, Rick.
Okay.
Yep. March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And there's a matinee, I believe, on the 5th as well at 2 p.m. The other times are at 7 p.m. The World University Games is on the foremost minds of many in this town thinking about next year. However, there will actually be a World University Game Championship speed skating event taking place March 2nd through 5th of this year on the Oval. And thankfully, the University Games planning staff, represented by a strong local coalition, are working with the district to coordinate viewing of these athletes and the races for our students, including bringing our elementary students up to view the races on March 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So all told, lots of wonderful things happening on the athletic pitch as well. That is my report.
All right, any questions?
Is the speed skating championships going to cause any headaches logistically around the school, or is that pretty much segmented around?
The only thing that we're in discussions about is just going to be about noise primarily, just with the announcing. But with the exception of that, it's limited to about 50 or 60 athletes total. There's a max occupancy of 200 attendees at the event, so we don't feel like traffic or congestion will be a concern.
So no state police safety zone?
I don't believe it'll be the level that we're going to see next year.
Will it affect the flag?
Parking was good.
It's possible.
Like I'm thinking Saturday afternoon. Because it's not going on at night, I don't think.
It's in the afternoon.
Yeah.
We may want to position somebody at the school parking lot to make sure that that's not being used.
Sure.
Overflow.
And we've been doing that with some of the events taking place at the arenas.
Yeah, and
right?
that's something we typically would do. ECA class tournaments, we create staff parking lots. When there's a school event.
Okay, thank you. Information for the board, there's the extracurricular activity report ending January 31st. And then there's some updated information regarding the unified start end times, as well as standards alignment, and then the community schools. Any discussion or comment on those items? Okay, linking goals with agenda items.
I think, I'm not sure exactly what category, certainly the presentation by the two ladies from the outing club could fall under students first and foremost, and perhaps also just community outreach with families and accessibility to the equipment. So perhaps those two areas.
piggybacking on that also, that fits into education, because item number 5 talked about having additional education around outdoor activities.
Thank you. Anyone else? The budget obviously fits in there. Under finance. If anyone has any others, please get them to Karen. Personnel, first up is the consent agenda. Recommended action is approve the following items which are included in the personnel consent agenda. It's 7B, teaching staff, long-term appointment. 7C, spring coaches. 7D, CSEA staff retirement or resignation, excuse me. And then 7E, the CSEA staff retirement. And then 7F, the CSEA staff retirement. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Second?
Second.
You
Um,
pick it,
Leanne.
Karen.
Dana, I have a quick question. Normally we all, and maybe it's not relevant or that important, but usually there's, we always see their stipend or the salary associated with the positions. And for some reason, they're not there this year. I'm just wondering if those could be added at some point.
For Peggy's position?
All of the coaches, normally
coaches,
when
okay.
the seasonal coaches come up, salaries are there for them and they're not there this time.
Yeah,
It's a good point.
It's, I excluded them because, when we had the potential of shutdown of the sporting events, there was a side agreement with the coaches, with the union.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was shut down?
When we had remember when the sporting events got shut down and they didn't get their full stipend amount?
Right.
Not this year, last year, the year before.
So
They were not,
last
they
year
weren't the
during
same.
COVID, we had a much shorter season, so their typical stipend that they get was done by an agreement, so just happened to be left off this year, so.
That's something that we can certainly have on there, Colleen. That's
Okay.
nice reminder, even though it's pretty consistent, so.
Before we get too far down to it, would like to thank the 2 staffers that we have retiring for their service to the district, Sue and Cora. They will be missed, I'm sure. And those are both very long tenures to be in those positions, 15 and 22 years.
Yeah.
Cora Clark-Watterson has pretty much been a nurse mother to most of the students in the community going way back, and she certainly is going to be missed.
I echo that. Thanks to both of those people for their service. Okay, if no further discussion, please vote. I believe that's up.
7 yes.
Okay, 7 yes. Nobody opposed. That passes. Next up is the Lake Placid Administrative Association recognition. And the recommended action is motion to approve the attached resolution recognizing the Lake Placid Administration Association. May I have a motion to accept this recognition?
So moved.
Martha Joan?
Martha Joan, yes. Discussion? I think we discussed this extensively last meeting, so.
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Okay. So the motion passes 6 yes, 1 no. Recommended actions, additional actions, I'm sorry. 8A is under consent, 8B is consent. 8C is the dress code. Recommended action is be it resolved, having given public an opportunity to be heard at a public meeting on the subject of the proposed changes, dress code policy 5300.25, the Board of Education hereby adopts the said policy with any proposed changes. May I have a motion to accept this policy? Second read.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan.
Second.
Thank you, Martha. Discussion.
Rick, I have a question or comment anyway. We've all received a copy of a letter from a teacher with concerns viewing their position on hats in school. And I just have a question moving forward. I understand the policy is going to go forward that allows high school students to wear hats in school. It is what it is. But I'm wondering how it's going to move forward. If there's a particular teacher, do they have the right or should they be allowed to at least say to a student, I understand there's a new policy. You are certainly welcome to wear a hat in the high school and the classrooms, but you can if you'd like to, but when you come in my room, it would be great if you didn't. I don't think there's anything wrong with a teacher being allowed to do that and letting the student decide whether or not that, Joe Smith or, Sue Smith had asked that. I understand you can wear the hat, but, if you didn't in my room, I'd appreciate it. And I don't know how that should be said moving forward, because I wouldn't want a teacher to be not reprimanded for it, but kind of called out for bringing it to a student's attention. But I think we're missing an opportunity for those teachers that would like to be able to ask students not to wear them in their room, to allow a student to be able to determine on themselves, even though they know they can, that, geez, Mr. Smith asked me not to, and I guess I won't. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know that anything should be done about it, but I'm hoping that we will allow a teacher to be able to say that without creating any kind of discord.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, because I think I had felt differently last week in that I wouldn't want a teacher to feel like they had to be the bad, the quote unquote bad guy. But I know that there's teachers in the school that have differing policies on, for example, cell phones. Like one teacher has a docking station where the students know as soon as they walk into the door, even though they're technically allowed to have their phones with them, the phone goes in a slot for them. And that's just the way that teacher just, does her room. So I wonder if something similar could be in this, where a teacher could say,
I think 9 out of 10 students, if the teacher said, I understand you got the right, go for it, but if you don't mind to take your hat off, that would be awesome. I think 9 out of 10 students are going to say, you know what, this teacher has asked me to do that, and I'm going to respect their wishes. And I think teachers should be allowed to say that. I think we're missing an opportunity to allow our teenagers to respect adults, asking. I don't know. But again, it may not need to be anything in writing. It could just be something that's kind of off the record. But I do think that there are teachers that might want to say that.
I will echo that. I would pose it in the form of a question, I guess, to Tim. Is this something, are we going to allow teachers to govern their classrooms, or because of the policy, they are not allowed to?
So I think it comes down to the implementation of the policy. I do, having spent the bulk of my career in the classroom, I'm certainly sensitive to being able to control the climate of your classroom and having certain values that you want to incorporate. I think because there is a power imbalance at times between teachers and students that if that sort of leeway is given classroom to classroom, that there's some guardrails put on it so that it doesn't create situations that are producing discomfort for students. But ultimately, I think there are ways to implement this that can respect the wishes of teachers, but still provide a predictable and consistent environment for students.
I
My
think
only
that-
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry, go ahead.
Colleen, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that, Tim. I really think that I don't think it would create any kind of a situation where anyone would feel uncomfortable. I just really think that these students are going to, rise to the occasion, and they're going to understand that, again, they could wear their hat wherever they want, but it's somewhat preparing them. We always talk about college students coming back and saying they're not being prepared for the real world and what's out there after they leave Lake Placid. This is just another example of when these students are going into the workplace in 2 or 3 years, that they're going to be given, an opportunity to make a judgment call. And I think this is just a really basic one where they walk into a room and so-and-so's like, he's not great, I'm wearing a hat in here, so I'm gonna put it in my backpack or leave it on my desk. And I don't want there to be any kind of, again, not repercussions, but I do think the teachers should be able to do that and feel comfortable and let the kids make their own decision.
I also think one of our other options is we not approve this and send it back to the dress code if we all feel that we should really think this hat thing a little bit further. I'm not saying that that is the answer. I'm just saying that's another option.
Well, I kind of agree with you, Joan. I just have this issue where I see the opposite, where people are not appropriately dressed. Even if it's on a Zoom call for court, for example, I'm just surrounded by people that are not appropriately dressed, and it affects them, and people do judge them for it. And so if I could wave my wand and make a uniform that was a blue sports jacket, khakis, and white t-shirt with a collar, I would do it, but we can't. So yeah, I mean, I'm for more formal. I understand that we have this class issue that is going to impact that and the trades or whatever, but I agree on, and at the very least, a teacher should be able to regulate a hat. And I guess if there's a religious exception, there's a religious exception, but maybe, John, we should send it back.
I don't think there's any religions that would necessarily qualify as a hat. I think it's usually referred to as a head covering, not a hat. But I think a hat policy would probably not cover religious garments anyway, just as default. Right.
What I'm struggling with is the fact we did have a task force or a ad hoc committee who came up with these guidelines, and yet, when do an unofficial poll of taxpayers, they find it absurd that we're going to allow hats in the classroom. Of course, there are the other side that say, let the kids do what they do. So I'm really having a difficult time with this. If we send it back to the policy committee, I'm not sure, without recommendation, I'm not sure what the policy committee will do with it. Joan or Martha, you may be able to answer that, but being on that committee.
I think the situation that we're in is that it was brought to the committee. We compared with other schools. We did we asked for the public's input, and people just didn't all come forward until after the fact. So I don't know. So I'm actually thinking that maybe if we just prolong it, and give them, okay, we have 2 weeks, and maybe we send out a letter to all the teachers, and how do you feel about hats? Like, we'd only heard from one. We didn't hear from any others. So maybe just give them a little bit more time, and then, I don't know, I think because this is an action item, I don't know if we can just table it, but
Oh, certainly.
Um,
Tim,
I
do you
think
have
it's a great idea, Joan.
do you have a
What was that?
temperature of the staff, Tim?
There were some surveys taken at the very start of the process, and there was, I don't have the data with me at hand, Rick. I can dig back into that. But to say that it's a contentious issue. So
Sure.
I think it's hard to say that there's going to be anything that moves a strong majority on either way in this.
Right. Yeah. And the public did have an opportunity to respond and didn't take advantage of that. And it was, we could kick the can down the road for several months here, but any other?
Like that, just past your term, right?
No, I want to resolve soon. Any other comments? How
Do
the
we
two
just set back
Dans
with
who have children?
Do we just send it back with Joan, will we just send it back with the recommendation that teacher's discretion, or are we gonna gather more information before we send it back?
No, Lee, I want to bring something up, and you could probably relate to this when you were in school with Christopher, which was many years ago, but they were able to wear hats. You were given the opportunity to, but if you remember, and I brought this up before with Frank Schischler's classroom, when you walked into his room, you removed your hat. And there was no problem with anything. You wore it in certain rooms, other rooms you didn't, I don't know, but there was never a problem then. There was just an understanding. And maybe there's a place where we can meet in the middle here again, where there is an understanding. And I would think that if the kids get to wear it, or students in some of the rooms, be grateful rather than having it all kind of thrown out the window. So that's just my thought.
Any other comments?
It's funny, it seems kind of almost trivial, but it actually is kind of actually really important. Because how you carry yourself in the professional world is a big deal. In the working world.
I think in the committee work, that one of the sentiments, and just to be clear, all I did was facilitate this discussion.
Yeah.
But one of the sentiments was that if there's just an outright prohibition, then there's no sense of situational awareness that we develop in the school, because students just inherently think that hats are prohibited outright, and that there may be circumstances that it isn't as big an issue. And that was really leading into like the CTE classrooms with the students over at the BOCES being allowed to wear the hats and things like that. That's where the presentation.
It's different at BOCES though. If you think of some of the programs at BOCES, especially, one of the building trades, when they're working, outside on buildings or whatever, that is a little bit different. But again, I think it circles back to, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We hear people not complaining, but bringing it to our attention that our students aren't prepared for the real world when they leave here. And part of that is a certain decorum with the dress code. I mean, they're allowed to whatever when they're seniors in high school and then they go out to college or in the workforce. That's all part of it. It's not just a cultural experience that they might be lacking. It's also and how they're, I guess, adapting to learning how to present themselves appropriately. So I don't know. I think it's a tough thing, but I don't know, Joan. You've got a good point about maybe putting this back there or delaying this. I don't know.
I kind of feel like the committee's gone through a huge process, very inclusive and trying to get all sorts of input. And this is the result of a lot of people's input and work and thought and research. Would we be questioning it at this point if we had not received a letter from one faculty member? I don't know.
I questioned it last time, Martha, I brought it up.
I mean, I've been wanting to give my uniform speech since this thing started. Like, no, everyone looked the same. I'd have everybody look absolutely the same, other than their haircut. But we can't do it, so.
I think it would be important to have some kind of a poll from the teachers, get an input from all the teachers at the high school level. Like you said, we've heard from one. I know there are others, and I know that there are people in administration. So I don't know. Again, it's one of those situations where it comes down to the point where you're voting on it, and then you hear from everyone. And that's kind of difficult when you get to that midnight hour or the 11th hour, and then all of a sudden the hands come up. It's unfortunate because, like you said, Martha, your committee has done a lot of work on this, but I don't think many people are completely sold on this.
So moving forward, I guess what Karen, correct me if I'm wrong procedurally, but we vote on it. If it votes no, we then can send it back to the policy committee with a recommendation that there's a teacher inclusion. If it votes yes and passes, then it moves forward.
You could postpone it. You could postpone the vote.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
postpone it.
I would suggest doing that then.
Okay, what sort of action do you want tied to that? I'd like to have
If we
just
table
further
it-
just,
Go ahead, Rick.
nope, you're on, please.
If we table it, can we still send it back to the policy committee for some type of teacher exemption or?
You can put whatever you want. You just say postpone the vote till, with the recommendation, getting input from teachers. You could say that. And I don't think you have to vote on that. You can just make that like a condition.
Well, I think rather than getting input from the teachers, I'd rather propose that we take into consideration individual classrooms and how this will affect the classrooms. I think that's, which translates to if I'm a teacher and I feel that I'm doing some sort of unit that supports not wearing of a baseball hat or other hats, then I can ask the students to take them off and not be subject to deviation from the policy.
How would that work policy wise?
You would, based on what Rick is saying, it might say something that teacher discretion with regards to the wearing of hats will be included within this policy or within the confines of their classroom or something like that.
And if Tim, if you see that to be problematic with, teacher X or Y, then I think that needs to be discussed as well. And if the policy committee comes back with, no, this is our policy, then, we should probably respect that. So this, as you've noticed, it is a big deal.
Like a part of the procedure, you mean?
Correct. Like if your policy is this and you make it part of the regulation, do you know what I'm saying? Or do you have?
I think because there's students have followed this process throughout, and the writing is going to be very important. That whatever the policy states should be explicit.
I think it'd be better if it was written in the policy. Because that guideline could get, lost.
So should I write after discussion? Motion is postponed Do you want to have it postponed for a certain reason or just motion is postponed? It's fine if it's just postponed. I don't think you have to attach anything to it.
No, but it'd be nice to, if we are in a favor of having it go back to be reviewed for the reasons of inclusion of the classroom discussion. If that's the consensus, I'm not saying that's, you know, Tim, you may be totally opposed to this and you'll give that viewpoint at, you know, in the meeting. When is the next policy meeting? Do you know?
You're looking at potentially late March. Is that what we're
Right.
suggesting?
Yeah.
And
So-
we're supposed to have it during spring break, but hopefully before spring break.
That would be my recommendation, but I'm a lone person, so if anybody else has any input.
Yeah, let's do
So,
that.
so you want to have it to go back to the policy committee?
Yes. With a recommendation for. How do we word that?
I really like the survey teacher survey idea. To specifically and overtly say, here's your chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Now's the time.
I would just like something in there again to allow teachers just to say something when students come in their room. And I don't know how verbiage that would be, but you know, something.
And that could go either way. It could be if we say no hats, a teacher could say that they can wear a hat, or if we say there's no hats, then a teacher can say, you know, it could go either way. But I think that when the policy committee meets at the end of March, we should be able to take it, like the homework should be done with these, with the poll of the teachers and stuff, so that we can come up with what we recommend and have that brought to the board right away. You know, like it gives us a month, and being on the policy committee, you know, I could take this on as a baby or something, I don't know, but we could get answers so that the end of the March, so at the end of March, when we do meet, we've talked to every teacher. We have an input from every teacher and other people in the building.
No, that's a great idea.
Is that doable, Tim?
Certainly. I think this would be a new survey then, and that survey would propose the very question, would your individual classrooms, would your ability to allow or disallow hats in your individual classroom be a favorable policy amendment from your perspective or something like that? Does that sound like a reasonable, I mean, I'll wordsmith it, but
Right.
that's the essential question here, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure, we can get some data on that, no problem.
Great.
Would it be worth it to just give 3 options and say which policy would be your preferred policy? You know, no hats at all, complete, you know, yes hats, and or yes hats with teacher discretion within the classroom? Or is that opening too many cans of worms?
There's a lot of cans. I think there's maybe asking a few different questions, a few different ways to have some different data sources, because you know that originally the intent was to have share community, student, and teachers, and to frame a survey as if the teachers ultimately will be the deciding factor.
Sure.
Would be interesting.
I do not want to discredit the committee, the task force whatsoever. This would be just a tweak to their recommendations. So.
I think that sounds. Go ahead, Martha.
Thank you. My suggestion is that Tim draft something and Joan and I be sounding boards on it, and we move forward carefully that way and not spend much more time tonight trying to figure it out.
I
Agreed.
think it's
Thank you.
also important to just make a note. We don't want to discount the students and their thoughts are on this either. We're not ignoring them. We're just trying to find a happy medium for everyone involved. And I certainly thank everyone on the policy committee.
Totally agree.
My children would like to move to also add no math to the prohibition. Just go ahead, just across the board, allow hats, but no math. That's what they're.
Math or math?
Yeah, math. Yeah.
I thought you said bath.
Arithmetic.
I'm like, what? We're going down the road of math?
Yeah. I mean, earlier they asked, like, what would the school board members with kids think? And that's what my kids would think. So
Yeah.
they're more concerned about the math than they are the hats. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other further discussion? Otherwise, that we've tabled that recommendation, that motion. Next up is special education, which is under consent, unless anyone has any questions regarding the March 8th meeting. Go to the cause, any emails?
I checked the email, there are none.
Okay. So we'll enter the adjournment phase of the meeting. You have a list of the next meetings. March 8th is the regular meeting, and then the 22nd is another budget workshop. Old agenda items. Seeing none. Anybody with new agenda items?
Could we get a quick update on the strategic planning process under old agenda items?
Do you want that next time? Yes.
Whatever you think is best.
I will put it down to add it to the agenda. Thank you. Any new
Rick,
agenda topics? Go ahead.
Sorry, Rick. I have a question on new agenda. We heard from, I'm just thinking of some of the other committees that we have, like buildings and grounds, and I can't remember. We heard from them in the fall, did we, or how long ago? Does anyone remember? And I'm just wondering, like some of the other committees, like the DEI committee, how often do they give us updates? I'm just wondering some of those other committees, if we're due for any updates from them.
Dana can probably speak to it was the buildings and grounds. It's now a standard meeting, correct? Dana?
You're right, yes, operations.
So-
We have, at the start of the year, we were doing the first month for the meeting, doing an update. I think we missed it last month, but that's okay.
And
And the DEI, is that a district committee now, or is that more of a community committee?
It's a community committee with Tim being the school liaison. I believe that's the way it's. Has that committee met, Tim or Martha?
It's kind of stumbling a little bit, trying to find its way, actually, is the way I should put it.
Okay.
And part of the issue right now is that Tim Prosper, who's the co-chair with Ken Hitch of St. Eustace, Tim is really occupied with The Little Mermaid. So
Taylor.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Confusing my T's. So maybe a request of the DEI committee to be prepared to report in like May or late April.
Yep. And we can rely upon Tim for that with the liaison. So any other committees that or any other new agenda topic items? If not, recommended action is that we motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:19 p.m. Hearing none, we'll continue to talk.
Yes.
I make a motion.
Thank you, Joan.
Second.
Second, Colleen. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Good night.
Everyone.
Good night.
Great evening.
Good night, everyone.